and I'll
a quick photo together. What can I say?
turn that on. All right. Well, thank you both for joining us for our session here. So chatting a little bit about kind of your pathway from a corporate space into startups. And we're joined here by Charles Gelman, did I get that right? Who's the founder and CEO of Hido Health. And then we have Maria Madrano, who's the founder and CEO of Inspirame. So we're excited to have you both here, and would love for you to just share a little bit about kind of one, just like what is your startup, just to lay that context, and then maybe we'll dive into kind of how you went from corporate space into startup. But we'd love to get the high level pitch of what Inspirame is. But thanks for being here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for the invitation. Excited to be here this morning. So Inspirame is an ed tech company where we are focused on helping to end generational poverty through educational attainment. Inspirame builds technology products that enables anyone from ages 13, and I like to say all the way to 101, to understand the pathways that are actually available by simplifying those processes. We're focused on the most affordable educational opportunities to ensure that we can help reduce student debt. But we're also focused on just enlightening and exposing everyone in the community on the reality of what skills are necessary for the workforce of the future. So we spend a lot of time collecting inspirational stories so that those users on our app can actually see themselves through the stories, and they can get a little bit of motivation. Inspírame, for those that don't speak Spanish, translates to inspire me. And given my lived experience, that really is, I know, is a differentiator between myself and the 124 first cousins that I have, was that I was inspired from a very young age. And having that constant inspiration in my home allowed me to see what was possible for me to be even on the stage today. And that is the purpose of what Inspírame is all about.
That is going to be very challenging to follow up. I'm inspired just by hearing your story. So my name is Charles Gelman. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Hido Technologies. We spent the last 5 years developing a robotic device from the ground up to help people assist themselves in the comfort of their home. So it's a hybrid between a Keurig coffee device and a Ring device that dispenses medications at the right time, the right dosage, the right frequency, and most importantly, ensuring that patients are following the prescribing regimen of the providers for the first time ever in the home.
I love it. Very quick pitches from both of you. Sounds like you've had a lot of experience pitching, which I know we'll get into. And so I think one of the questions I always love to ask entrepreneurs is like, have you always seen yourself as an entrepreneur? Is that something, oftentimes it was like, oh, I sold candy when I was young, or some other types of stories like that. So I'd love to kind of like, what are some of those first experiences of being entrepreneurial or being an entrepreneur, and then and then we'll hop into kind of your corporate pathway into entrepreneurship.
Yeah, so I started my entrepreneurship very, very young. So as a kid, I actually started going around the neighborhood and washing cars for $1 a car. And I probably didn't get the value add based upon the services, but it did give me a lot of experience to communicate with different neighbors and different personalities, and then also get that experience of what type of drive and persistence it's going to take to succeed. So as you go door to door, not everyone's going to want their car washed by a little kid. So a lot of no's, but some yeses, and then you develop relationships and clientele. And I think it really set the foundation later in life to all the other business ventures that unfolded after that.
Yeah, I would add the same. I think, the first thing, my first memories, I've always been bilingual. And so from a young age, I realized that I was an entrepreneur, not knowing what the word meant, but just providing a service. And so when I think about the entrepreneurship, I was always that product and service mindset, which really set me apart. The services that I offered were bilingual translating services at a young age. Then that translated into the service of being able to walk the neighbors' kids to school because they saw that I was responsible of going to school every single day, to then creating products where I would spend my summer months in Mexico, and I would see my grandparents and my cousins, popcorn and cookies and different things. And then I saw how they would put those in baggies and use a wax candle to seal it. And it was a light bulb moment of like, wow, I can take this back home and sell it. And so there I was every weekend selling cookies and everything that my family would sell in Mexico. So So yes, from a very young age, whatever money I made from then I could diversify my product, because then I would buy stickers and I would sell those. So when I think back, I definitely have had the entrepreneurial spirit from a very young age. It's helped me in corporate America, which we'll talk about. And I think that's what's allowed me to then just say, I need to do something on my own, because it's just, when you got it, you got it.
Love that. So I think I'll have to put some like theory around it, that's like as an entrepreneur, you were selling something young early on and had those tendencies. So we'll have to do some deeper research around that. But so, both of you kind of having that entrepreneurial mindset early on, and then both, went to university and graduated and kind of seemed to take a more corporate path. So would love to kind of hear, like, one, how did you hop into that? And did you kind of, as you were in the corporate space, kind of know you wanted to start something down the line, or did you just kind of stumble upon your venture and just see the opportunity in the market?
Well, I'll start. So I have a pretty non-traditional experience on this piece of it, because I was the first in my family to graduate high school, the first to go to college, and first to even go to graduate school. And so there was never this idea that I could actually be a CEO or start some kind of tech company. But there was a desire to just ensure that I was no longer poor in reality. Like, that was my drive. I wanted to ensure that I could have the opportunity to offer my family those opportunities that I would see on TV, quite frankly, because that's what I would see every single day, of just what was possible. And so when I think about those experiences, it was just those goals in mind, being the first to graduate high school. And once I did that, it was like, check. Then it was the first to graduate college, check. And as I was graduating college, the realization that I was working full-time while going to school full-time. And so I had that experience. So I fell into the corporate gig. I never thought, oh, I'm going to go get that corporate job. My drive is just, I want to be able to buy a car, and I want to be able to live in a place that had a doorbell. Like, it was that basic for myself. And so as I kept going and meeting those goals, it was like, I could do a little bit more. And I just kept going and going and going. And that's why InSpeedUp is so personal to me, because I think back, if someone would have told me that I could have done X, Y, and Z, I can only imagine what more I could be doing, right? People always ask me, what would you have done if you knew? And I said, oh, I would have loved to have been a judge. Like, I would have loved to have been a judge. I would have loved to have run for the United States office of the president. Like, there's so many different things. And so for me, it was just that drive to make sure that I was progressing further and further. And so as each opportunity came up, I think that's probably been the differentiator, is that more opportunities opened up. And so that's really how I ended up getting to the corporate space, and then realizing when I was in the corporate space, there was no one that looked like me when I was sitting at the table. And so again, what I need to do to ensure that I could learn and continue to grow. So it was a lot of just making the most when I was sitting at that table where I was always the only. So I'm super comfortable now being the only one. I'm super comfortable disrupting. I'm super comfortable asking questions. I'm super comfortable doing things that most people aren't comfortable with, because I've been doing it for so long. So I'll just stop there, because I probably have lost the train of the question, but I think it's just the important piece of ensuring that you don't let your beginnings determine where you can go. And that was probably the biggest thing that I've been learning over this last few months as a journey in the startup piece, which is what excites me, especially when the doors get closed, right? And they say no, I'm like, okay, I'll just talk to somebody else.
Yeah, so my experience with going from corporate to the startup world is really, I think, centered around intellectual curiosity. So as I went through one company unit, you kind of pick up some different insights based upon the diversity of the people around you and surrounding you. You get lessons learned based upon your roles. And usually there's opportunities presenting themselves, and it's whether or not you dive in or let somebody else dive into the opportunity. And so my experience has really evolved over time based upon the insights and the perspectives that I've gotten by each person that I was able to touch or that touched me. And that has culminated, I believe, into the evolution of where I am today, is because of those unique insights and data points that existed at each company and what I've learned. And because of the culmination of all of those different experiences, that really led me to where we are today with Hido.
I love it. So yeah, I mean, I just think of those different pathways. One, just like the longing not to just have a corporate job, but to actually like reap the rewards of what that would define in terms of how you looked at kind of success, right? I love the visual example of like having the doorbell, right? And then now what's next after that, right? And then the continual opportunity that comes with it. And then entrepreneurship is that core driver to create opportunity. And then, for you, that kind of intellectual curiosity to continue on and experience those things. And so, as you're both kind of at these corporations and kind of saw the opportunity in the market to take that next step, was that something that you kind of just like cut all ties and decided to launch into it? Or how did you kind of manage that transition into saying, I'm going to do this full time and build this business? And then what were some of those challenges? I know we were chatting before, hey, family and a variety of those things, and were those supporters or were those sometimes barriers as well? And so we'd love to learn a little bit more about what that looks like.
Yeah, it's a huge leap going from a corporate job where you have health benefits, you have a lot of the things that stabilize your daily activities as well as support your livelihood. And you have, some type of clear vision or path based upon what you've done. And then you're taking the leap into entrepreneurship where the funding sources are a little opaque, or what the future or those data points will look like, and if the family will support you. There is always some skepticism based upon what you're doing because it is a new venture, and what is the likelihood of it actually succeeding is very low probability. So you're about to go on a journey where you had a stable income to a very opaque, risky venture that may or may not work out, and more than likely it won't. So what makes you unique versus every single other person with an idea or a vision to execute upon that? And then you get into the longevity. And Maria, I'll tease it. I'll tease you up, but basically, the longer you go and the more time over target you have, the higher probability of success there is.
Oh, hands down. Hands down. So I'll share on my end what we're doing with Inspírame. We've been doing all our lives. So the last 20 years that I've been on this journey of being in corporate America, and my co-founder and life partner has been 20 years in high education. We've been doing it, but in a very manual way, right? We've been mentoring students, we've been mentoring parents, we've been out in the community, we've been sharing information, we've been advocating for others. And so it wasn't anything that new. I think for us was more so, I kept hearing the stories over and over and over again. And because I worked at amazing companies like Google and Cisco and Visa, where it's all technology, I thought, okay, anything that can be repeated, you can apply technology to it. And so it was an idea that was in my mind for the last 10 years. But as with anything, when you're the first in your family, you don't really know what to do next. You have to look for those mentors or those sponsors that are telling you like, hey, you need to go do this or go do that, because you're so busy just trying to keep everything going. That it wasn't until a peer of mine that actually worked with me in the data team at Cisco, who was no longer working at Cisco, who called me and said, we need to do a startup. He's like, I've been wanting to do a startup, and if I'm going to do something with someone, it has to be with you. And it's because, again, he's worked with me for so long that he knows that if I'm going to do something, I'm not going to give up. Like, we're going to keep going, we're going to make it happen. And his idea was, let's do a mentoring platform. And I said, no, if we're going to do something, we're going to digitize what I've been doing the last 15 years, because this is a real opportunity to change so many people's lives. The mentoring will come, but if we can create the baseline to actually give everyone an equal opportunity to participate in our educational economy, and our financial economy, in our community, imagine that. And believe me, to this day, he was just like, I didn't understand what you meant, but he trusted me. He trusted in regards to what we could do. I knew I had my co-partner and co-founder at home, where I always tell folks, I'm just going to go ahead and digitize his brain, because what he's been doing is what works. Sorry about that. And that was the beginning of it. I remember I was leaving on a trip to Japan. I was taking my husband along with me just to thank him, because he had to deal with my crazy traveling schedule. And I told this co-founder, if you're really serious, you need to meet us at the SFO airport, because we're flying out and we can talk about what we want to do, but I have no time. And he showed up, we had a conversation, we documented it on a paper napkin, we shook hands, and that was 4.5 years ago. And I can tell you, 4 of us started as co-founders. Today, there's 2 of us that are like eating, breathing, living. And I look exactly what you said. All of the educational naysayers were like, you 2 are crazy. You could never And we're like, okay, just watch us. And as days pass by, as long as I can keep the lights on and as long as I'm able to talk and bring light to what we're doing in Inspirame and actually realize that we have changed so many people's lives every single day, that's what gives this the energy. And then I sit back and I'm still connected to the corporate world. I get to choose now where I spend my time in the corporate world. So I get to look and lead and bring that insight back. And I also realized that the time in corporate Americas would allowed me to actually be able to have the guts to be doing what we're doing, because you're right, that flexibility, that stability is not as stable and it can be a little bit scary. So there's a lot of different dynamics, but I think that there is something to be said about the longitudinal aspect of what's possible and the grit and the resistance that you bring that you learn in corporate America. Because the secret is, for those of you that have not ever peeked into corporate America, they don't know. They don't have all the answers either. Every single day you're trying to figure it out. Every single day something's moving. And I think that really allowed to be comfortable with the uncomfortable nature of running a massively global company.
Just slower to get to that we don't know or have the answer because there's so many processes to go through. But I think one of the things, that I'm hearing was just like, the team was such a key element of kind of like launching. One was just maybe like having the support to say, yeah, we believe in the vision that you have. And then also I was wondering if you still have the napkin that you all signed. I feel like those are always like a interesting thing of those types of stories. And so would love to hear, like, how long did you have the idea, and how like were you thinking across your time in corporate? And then like you obviously made a decision to say, all right, I'm going to cut this. Like, what was that? Why did you cut ties at that time? And was it a matter of finding team, or you now had the right amount of resources to maybe deploy and getting something built? What was kind of that process from idea time standpoint to then saying, I'm going to actually go into this thing full time?
For myself, it was the beginning of this year, our first customer that we signed on. And for me, it's all about the trust, right? The customers in our case are community colleges that we're starting with first. And so for a community college to say, yes, we want to be your customer, and they're being our first, I thought, okay, I can't not be on this full time and really have the focus. So it wasn't necessarily having the funding that would enable me to do that, but it's having the ability to be able to sleep at night to say, I'm giving it my all to ensure that the customers who are trusting us for what we can do are going to receive the full focus. And that's really what was a really big game changer for me. And also because I've been leading this dual life of working full-time, startup full-time, family full-time. There's just a lot that is going on there that for me, it was like, I'm going to put a focus here for the next 7 months. And if something's going to happen, it's going to happen during this time. And if not, I'm going to give myself permission to be able to say, I'm no longer doing this and just go back to what I was doing. Even though I know that's just not how I'm wired, but I was telling myself that just to give myself that space to say that I'm just going to do this for a little bit more. And here we are, right? We're in November. There's so much traction from where we were even a few months ago. And it's just, again, just another signal to what's needed to continue moving forward.
So it's like some of that customer validation was right there, yeah.
Yeah, so we had a series of events and milestones that happened. A couple of them were NIH-funded grants where we focused on research efforts at Stanford and also Rush University. In addition to that, we also had a Medicare Advantage pilot program where we validated a substantial reduction in hospitalization and cost of care for congestive heart failure patients. And these folks are usually having 20 or 25 different medications. So we hit as a company a series of milestones in addition to market traction and capital behind us. And the team of engineers that came together were actually from a previous startup that we were basically born out of Stanford. And because of the failure of the other medical device startup, we had an opportunity to go after something that nobody's ever been able to accomplish. So my background's in data science. So I was very skeptical that this data existed and whether or not we could actually get it within the marketplace. So after doing quite a bit of due diligence, we quickly discovered that there was really not a real great solution in the market. And in order to accomplish this task, we would have to build it from the ground up. So we do have a pen and paper. My writing looks like hieroglyphics. So I had my daughter, who's an artist, draft up what the design of it would be. And then we made the renderings, we made the designs, we 3D printed the prototypes. We built everything from the ground up to where we are today.
Awesome. I love it. So obviously across both of that, creating the digital platform and solution to then creating the prototypes takes resources. So I know you've gotten a grant and I know you've been fundraising. So would love to kind of, have you share a little bit more about accessing capital and how that's been the ups and downs of that process and kind of what that's looked like and where you are maybe in that process currently.
So it's a journey. There's lots of highs and lows. We bootstrapped the first 3 years of like actually building the product personally. So just personally put up the monies. Thanks to the time that I spent in corporate America, I had some money saved. And so that allowed us to actually build out the baseline of the product. And then we went into what we say it's a family and friends round. Well, again, I don't have lots of family that could afford to put some money in. So we went to the angel rounds, and gratefully, I've worked with a lot of people that have the resources. And so that allowed us to also raise some money through folks that I've worked with, through my journey. And I say that because my husband has been in the education piece. So again, it's not many folks that would have the same resources as those that I've had the opportunity to work with. But there's also been a lot of education that was required, right, in regards to exposing many that I work with on the reality of the educational landscape, which many don't see or maybe many don't understand. And so for as much as that I was pitching, it was also informing and educating so folks could actually understand what was possible. And so we've done that for quite some time. I would say the last 2 years. We continue on our journey now of raising, and we're also diversified our approach because we're getting a lot of attention from organizations that are in larger nonprofit status that do have grants that are becoming available. So we're opening up those opportunities as well, because our goal is just to ensure that we can keep our product free for the community. And the word free isn't necessarily so that it attracts traditional investors. They're usually a little skeptical, like, what do you mean it's free? And I'm like, trust me, free to reduce a barrier for our users. And there's so much more that can become of this because we become a data company, right, in regards to knowing who do we have on our platform and what our opportunities are to fill those skill gaps that exist across so many of the corporations that I can tell you spend billions of dollars trying to find the next available talent. And so there are so many worlds that we're connecting, and it's telling that story and knitting the story. So we're in the middle of fundraising. It's probably the most challenging aspect of being an entrepreneur, but I know it's also the most rewarding, and that's why I'm in charge of getting that done.
You're right there, I know.
Yeah, I think the life and death of a startup really comes down to the fuel that pushes the fire, which is the funding mechanism. I mean, you can have the vision, you can have the dream, but it comes down to execution and building the team around you to support your efforts moving forward. We've been exceptionally fortunate. So we've had folks, friends in the neighborhood, people that I've spoken to, people via LinkedIn, all engage with what we're doing to create a vision to potentially create the blueprint for the future of medicine. And because of some of the validation points that we've had with the National Institute of Health and some prestigious universities, it's given us the opportunity to move forward and also to be able to impact patients' lives. So from a funding perspective, we've had a variety of different sources, from angel funding to institutional investors, and then we continue to raise funds to push forward to our next milestones. But a lot of the funding is really focused around how do you push things forward? What are the next, areas that you can pinpoint and hit? And then strategically as a founder, as long as you can continue to hit those milestones, the funding will be there to support your efforts.
Awesome. So I will pose one question in here. Want to see if there's some questions also from our audience here. And so when you're kind of like thinking, like, what are the next steps that you're both working towards as a venture, and maybe that could be like a strategic milestone or like expanding team, and sounds like fundraising is a component to that for both of you. And then in addition to that, like looking back to when you kind of had that idea, is there something that you strategically maybe would have done back then to better set yourself up for launching the venture come that time? Yeah,
so this is where things get really interesting. Sometimes you can't connect the dots, until the dots present themselves right in front of you. So I'll give you a perfect example. 4 years ago, I went to a show focused on clinical research and pharma organization to fast track data monitoring and data integrity for clinical trials. And that was pre-COVID. So imagine now being able to catalog dose by dose every single medication, the efficacy, the safety, to accelerate drug development, but also bring it to the market quicker. Now, a number of years ago, that wasn't on the top of radar, but now they're very mindful of the combination of drugs and the types of outcomes that are possible. So you just never know from articulating your vision or your value prop to different environments of when it's going to bubble up to the marketplace for you to capitalize on the opportunities.
For us at Inspirame, it's all about scaling now. So it's about being able to fundraise, to hire the teams that actually can continue to keep the work going forward. For all of what we've accomplished, when we've built a platform, it's available on the App Store and the Play Store. We have a huge followership online. There's so many folks that know about Inspirame and Deco Guide, and conversations are happening. And besides myself and my partner, Mauricio, we have not had a full-time team. We've had maybe a combination of 2 people full-time across 12 different people that are giving of their time. And then we have our offshore engineering team that has been with us from day one that we're super proud of. But there hasn't been, like a full-time person that's dedicated, that doesn't have a distraction of a full-time job that's paying them. And so that's what gets us really excited. We say this all the time, like, we've gotten this big and we've added so much value, what I call this shoestring budget. Imagine if we actually had a team that was available to do this full time. That's what we're after, because we know that's going to unlock so much more value. And it's similar to what you said. I'm like, it's just catching the wave of what is coming and the needs and whatnot. And so much that's happening in our ecosystem from an education perspective, that it's about changing the way we're showing up, but also it's about meeting people where they are, and also providing those that are receiving the benefit of what we're providing, giving them a voice for them to share why this matters for them. So there's a lot that we have going on in managing, but we know it's the right time with the right folks, and the right opportunity.
Oh, yeah, actually thinking for both of you, you've been building the engine for growth, and the markets have shifted towards exactly what you're creating, from the universities and community college, enrollments just plummeted, right? And so it's you have the solution to help for that. And then, obviously in the healthcare space, that shift in the market that you shared was super timely for, advancing those types of technologies. So love it. Well, would love to see if there's some questions from all of you Danny. Sure. I will run out there.
Hi, my name is Danny. I started LLC in 2020 because I innovated seals for the masks that are washable, reusable, hypoallergenic, and transferable repeatedly to a clean mask. The adhesive properties last indefinitely. I could not find anybody to fund me in 2020. And during that time, I continued innovating. I innovated a attachable air filtration system that filters it coming in and filters it going out. That way you don't feel like you're rebreathing your own air in the mask. And because COVID has gone to a point, luckily, that we're not as much in a panic, I've decided to switch my company to focus on the flooding issues that's going on with housing and flooding. What should I do with getting funding on this? Because I've been in business for 3 years, but I've just been paying taxes.
So it sounds like the question is, a pivot in the business, I think a pretty large one, from masks to kind of looking at the housing industry. I know just from chatting with Danny as well, was kind of one of the things he's trying to create is how do I fund that first prototype, right? I have a vision for what I've created or for what I want to create, and there's potential value there, but I need to raise capital to do that. And so is that something that maybe either of you ran into in kind of funding that first prototyping phase, or what did that initial thing look like for you?
Yeah, so Danny, this is where I'm going to push back on you, is you have to figure out if there's product market fit. So you've transitioned or you pivoted from mass to some type of,
It's like a foundation for
It's the
housing.
second foundation that lifts the home up when the flooding comes in, so that it isn't destroyed by the floods and then lowers back down. I do a mixture of styrofoam, recycled styrofoam, polymer, and polypropylene is recycled, and then a polymer on that makes it strong as steel. And it's buoyant, insulated. I just need R&D funding for it.
yeah. So what I would push back on you is maybe create an illustration or model and then go to whomever would purchase this and see what would they purchase it for and if they would purchase it. And if they won't, or if they won't pay for it, then it's not viable. But it's the onus is on you to prove out that the market exists before you build out. If you build out and there's no market, then the investors come up with nothing and then you wasted a bunch of time.
And in 2020, they had a market for seals on masks. We only had 200,000 dead Americans. Now we're over 1 million, but nobody cares anymore about the mask. I never got vaccinated because I trust the mask. Now, I pivoted away from that because I couldn't find funding for you. I mean, nobody's pointing in the right direction.
Well, so this is where you got to take the onus as an entrepreneur. You have to trust your gut instinct, and if the market dries up or if nobody will purchase the product that you're presenting, then that market doesn't exist. And that's when you need to pivot. And if you're looking for mentorship, I would look to Sac State or other folks that have done this before in the past and kind of give you some guidance, because not every idea you have is going to be an executable and viable business idea to go after. And that you got to surround yourself with other mentors that can give you that guidance. And you have to talk to people, as many people as you can, people in the audience, and figure out whether or not this is something that they would be of interest to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but how do I protect my IP? Because see, this device right here, it amplifies you when you're talking in the mask. And I told an investor about this product that I had imagined that I could attach to any mask to be able to speak up. I named it Speak Up. And they made Mask Speaker 3 months later and put it out on the market. How do I protect the IP?
Yeah, I think it would really become, I would really lean on other mentors to determine whether or not it's important to protect that IP and if that IP is of any value in the future. But there's probably a network of folks that you could lean on to have those broader discussions to see if it's something to even pursue.
Yeah, I'll connect you with Raphael from our technology transfer office. And, I know as we talked yesterday, one, it's looking at, yes, there's things that you can patent and protect, but ultimately the market's purchasing the value that comes with it, right? And so understanding who has the problem and are they willing to pay for it, whether there's IP behind that or not, is more impactful for getting investment and funding that initial thing. And the idea is not protectable, it's the actual underlying technology that would be. So, drawing a diagram of two things floating, there's no IP based in that, right? And so if you went to, say, a builder and getting feedback that they would actually purchase that, you didn't share any IP with them. But I'll connect you with Raphael and he can help you with that. I don't know if, Maria, if you have anything or if we...
No, the only thing I would add is for us, again, we didn't get any funding either. And so it was the personal investments that we had to make, right, to build, because we knew that there was a product market fit, but there was no onus because customers were like, yeah, we know we need that, but it's just not needed right now type of thing. And so that's where a lot of it came up for us. It's the personal piece of having to, sell a home and, and not going on vacations and doing all these things to start to get the basic funding, which has been a big part of our journey as well.
I am a disabled person on fixed income, and yes, I took about $12,000 taking all this stuff out during 3 years that I was trying to get my family going. I put in the smoke.
Yeah, We'll connect you with Raphael. I think it sounds like a barrier is kind of trying to protect the IP while you're trying to talk to potential customers. So I think he'd be a good person to chat with of what you actually need to protect and what not, because I think ultimately you're going to have to get to the market and talk to people to actually to understand if there's desirability in the marketplace, because that's what's going to ultimately drive it, right? Like I hear you on investing the resources and the time to start a business, right? From an entity standpoint, but a business, you need customers. And so really trying to do that type of work, and we can help you along that process. So awesome. What other, yeah, Arlene, and then, yeah, we'll go Arlene and then we'll go back here.
I see that you've invested a lot of time and effort and your own funding to get as far as you have, which is great. And I imagine that the team building that you have to do, it's going to have to be very intentional. So beyond the skill set, if you need somebody for marketing or managing a business, what have you, how are you going to assess someone as a cultural fit for who you want in your tribe?
So that's such a great question. The work that I did in corporate America was all about diversity and inclusion. And so the important piece of ensuring that everyone that is on your team feels that they belong, that they matter, and that they actually are contributing to the overarching outcomes. And so I think what's helped us at InSpeedMS specifically, because we haven't had necessarily the true funding to have somebody say full time, that we've been able to ensure that employees feel that they actually have, skin in the game, that they feel that they are able to contribute in a way that's so meaningful, that they've been with us on the highs and lows. That when I'm able to ring that bell, as they say, when we get that really big, lead investor and those many customers that are humming, that's going to be part of our story. That our story was, we're here to support the community because we've actually built what we built through community. And so when I look at the team members that approach us that want to work with us, it's about ensuring that there's this understanding of why are they interested in contributing to what InSpeedMS is looking to build. And so regardless of the skill set, because I think everyone has the opportunity to learn whatever skill would be needed, if it's a marketing or business development or a content researcher or a finance person, but there has to be a connected tissue back to the essence of what we're building and for who we're building. So for me, it's very personal. I have very personal conversations. We connect at that level because when things get tough, I want to make sure that people still feel that they want to be a part of this journey, because it's no bigger thing that can disrupt the movement of the work is you don't have a team that's highly engaged and highly leaning into the probability of what can we create as a magic. And I look back and I'm really excited about that and feel a lot of pride that so many folks that work with us have been with us since day one, and through the highs and the lows. And we continue with that mindset as we look at, the bigger roles that we'll be looking at in the future.
Yeah, so I believe in the best and the brightest. So no matter, race, color, age, gender, whatever, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you don't have a role. In a startup, it's much different than a corporate application. Corporate application, you have a title, you have role and responsibilities. You have some type of defined parameters of what's expected. But in a startup, what's expected is whatever it needs in order to push the company forward, no matter what that could be. So one day you might be a mechanical engineer, the next day you might be go fetching coffee or running to a conference, depending upon what the business needs. And having that type of mindset to understand that I am willing to not just give my heart, my soul, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes in order to push the company forward so we can hit those next set of milestones. That's the type of personality, that's the type of person that we're looking for. It's more than just being smart and driven. You got to have to know that everybody is doing the exact same thing, and I won't do or have anybody do anything that I wouldn't do myself. So as long as we're all on the same page and we all want the same thing to help the community, to help the company grow, and to help elevate everybody in the company, because we want everybody to evolve. I want you to develop new skill sets. I want you to develop and encourage your talent. And any ideas that you have, I want those to be explored, because that just benefits you, but also the company.
Love that, the entrepreneurial mindset that they'll have to have, and maybe you can ask them if they've sold their chocolates and if they've done the car washes as well. Awesome. The question back here.
My husband is going into a process of starting his own landscaping company, and I just have a couple questions of. So I'm kind of worried about how you can put your time and everything and money into investing. So how do you end up like giving yourself a paycheck, whereas keeping the company afloat? You know what I mean?
That's a great question. So what you're talking about is managing the finances while you grow and develop the business. And my journey, and Maria can discuss her journey, but usually there's a transition period. So as you grow the business, there'll be some type of revenue in the door, and you have a choice whether or not you want to pour more money in the business to grow it from a marketing standpoint, or do you want to pull that money away to grow slower? And this is dependent upon how much money you have in your bank. So if you have, let's say, 6 months of savings or 12 months of savings, maybe you can be more aggressive on growing the business, because that means you can transition faster out of whatever that steady paycheck is. So this is where you have to run some calculations and figure out what's best for you and what type of risk you'll take on as an entrepreneur. But it's a fantastic business. A lot of folks make a lot of money doing it, and those relationships that you build, if you foster them, you can really build a pretty good book of business that later you can sell to somebody else.
To say plus one to that, it's really just based on where you are and how fast you want to grow. So I can say there were some months where there was no payment of salary, right? And it's what we did, but at least in our situation, where my co-founder and I, we are married as well. And so it was just, what do we need as a baseline to make sure that we're feeding our children and keeping the lights on in our home? And then what is it that we need to ensure that we're keeping the business going? And so it's just finding the right balance for us. Still, we're there each month. It's just ensuring that we have what we need to keep up with our commitment that we made to our customers, keep up with our development, keep up with what we need to ensure that our teams are taken care of, because our team members, again, they need to be paid. And then whatever is left over, we make the decision as to what can we afford to keep for ourselves, or what is it that needs to go back into the business until we're comfortable enough to be able to actually say we're going to have a firm salary per se. And that's just in our situation because we're building technology, and it's ebb and flow every single month.
Question and answers. Yeah.
What did you notice that you had a shift in your mindset as an entrepreneur? Like, I've got a great idea. I think this could become a thing, a product. It could become a service. It could become a business. So as you started this journey, did you have a mindset shift as you began to build it and saw that this could become something bigger than, myself, something that people want, something that people need, and then you get vested in continuing the growth of it? Did you?
That is a fantastic question, because everyone's story evolves over time based upon the milestones, the characteristics of the company and how it progresses, or if you reach an obstacle or challenge, you have to pivot accordingly. So yes, things change over time, and also your perspective of the business and your engagement in the business also changes depending upon how the story is unfolding. So based upon what's happening in the business, your thinking should evolve over time. You shouldn't have the same passion or interest when you first started in January versus where we're at right now in November. Things should have altered in the market if you're clipping away with different milestones. And if you shift your thinking, and as you grow as a team, their thinking will also change. That might influence the way that you're thinking about the story or the evolution or the go-to-market strategy of the business. But that is a fantastic question.
And I think there is something about, I've heard this terminology that when you're an entrepreneur, you have to be in love with what you're doing and what you're building. And so I think just like in life, as more time progresses, you just fall more and more in love with what is possible. And you're learning through every interaction, whether it's a yes or whether it's a no. The no's are just as important of why no? If it's a no from an investor or a no from a customer, to figure out, is it a no because I didn't articulate what we can do in a way that's clear, or is it a no because they're just not seeing the actual opportunity? And so then I need to work on the story piece. So for me, I just feel like the more time that passes, that love gets deeper and deeper and the commitment gets deeper and deeper. And so at this point, I no longer have that fear of are we going to make it or not? I'm putting it out to the universe. Like, I don't have that fear anymore. Like, I feel like we are going to make it. Is it still going to be tough? Heck yeah, but it's part of the journey. And what are those next milestones that are coming? So there is this mind shift that does occur, that I think is just organic to where you are in your journey. And I even think back to the 4.5 years that I've been in this, that I'm thinking, I'm so glad they didn't say yes back then, because I don't really know if I was really ready back then, right? Like, you think about all these interactions and whatnot, and it just becomes part of the overall experience.
Love that. It makes me think of one quote. It was like a leader's job is to translate vision into reality, and that vision changes over time, I would imagine, based on customers giving feedback or gaining investment. Okay, now I need to do it a little bit differently. And so really that mindset has to shift based on the milestones, but also how the vision changes. And then like Charles, on your example, makes me think of the mindset shift of like working on your business versus in your business. And like, as a small team, you have to do both, right? And so it's like, have you dedicated time to say, okay, where are we going and how do we get there? But then also, how do I do the things to get to that point? So I love that. Any last questions? And if not, we'll do one, and then I'll wrap us off with one final question.
So I have a question about your experience and education. So what do you think values more, like the hard soft skills or like the education you learned in lieu of the company, if that makes sense?
So for me, it was both. So obviously I had my experience of the time that I've spent in corporate America and the skills that I gained there from, negotiating and influencing and being able to be a collaborator and being agile and all those great things. But I also realized that without my education, right, I have 2 master's degrees. I have a master's in organizational development and an MBA from Sac State. And I know that without those degrees, I would have never been given the opportunity to actually gain the experience. I'm mindful of just my situation, who I am, and having to work 10 times harder at times. And so for me, it's equally as important, experience and education. And I'm also, I always tell folks that I'm constantly learning. And so my learning never stops. And it's interesting because I got the same question yesterday with some high schoolers. I went to go do a presentation with them, and they asked the same question. I'm like, both are equal. Like, both enable certain pieces of your journey. And so I would never say that, oh, the experience outweighs the education or education outweighs experience. It really is a balance. And when you are in your particular situation of your journey, you'll pull from different areas, and you'll realize that you're pulling from something you may have learned in the classroom, or from the experience you had at school, or you're pulling from the experience you had in a work environment. And that's true for me.
So I'm going to say something that's might be a little counterintuitive, and this really depends upon the application of where you are pushing those soft or hard skills. So if you were a very exceptional, talented computer scientist, but you didn't go to school, well, then you're already demonstrating your experiences based upon your past work. And so maybe education, it may or may not help you in your career, depending upon what your path looks like. So if you're trying to build up your landscaping business, does it make sense to go to school to study finance or accounting, because that might propel your business? It might, but maybe not, finish a degree in that. So it really depends upon where you're trying to focus those specific skill sets. It can benefit some particular industries. If you're working through the corporate landscape, generally speaking, you need to have a variety of different degrees. I finished up, 3 different degrees and a variety of different skill sets, but was it absolutely necessary? May or may not, depending upon how far up the food chain you want to rise to. If you're at an executive leader standpoint, you're probably going to need to graduate from a top 25 school, be from a prestigious university, but that's not necessarily the case, because there's always exceptions. So to your original question, I think it just really comes down to the application and where you're trying to serve up those soft or hard skills.
So the final question for you both is, one, anything I didn't ask you that you want to share? And then secondly is anything this community can do to support you in your ventures?
Yeah, so we currently are moving forward with the HIDO robotic device. And if anybody's interested in looking at it, just go to hidohealth.com. We have plenty of videos, done a bunch of podcast interviews. We're really excited about the potential application for dementia research as well as heart failure. And we're going to continue to push that news out in the near future. So we're just looking forward. And as from an ask to the community, what I would say is that we'd appreciate your support. So if you want to like or comment on any of those videos, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
And I'll do the same. So we are all about pushing out content to really inform our community. So you can follow us on Instagram. Deco Guide is our handler because that's the name of our actual product. If you're on TikTok, it's the same one. And it's just ensuring that you can share that. I can guarantee that if it's not helpful for you, it's probably helpful for someone that you know in your community and your family. And so we're looking for that support. If you're a Spanish speaker, we're on the radio station once a month as well, and we're constantly sharing information there. And I think from a community support perspective, it's just sharing, commenting, and any sort of introductions. There's no introduction that's too big or too small. We're always open to having conversations and always open to ensuring that we can connect with all of our communities. So that would be a really big help for us.
Sounds good. So as a community, sounds like follow you all on social media and promote. There's definitely credibility that comes when our community starts to rally around our products and solutions. So we got our task to support you in doing so. And thank you both for being here and sharing your stories and answering our questions from our audience here. So thank you both, and wish you best of luck in the continued entrepreneurial journey, and know the Carlson Center is here to support you both. So thank you. All righty.
Thank you.
Here we go.
I was going to say that
Here we go.
on point.
It's my first time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm right.
All righty. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, appreciate it. Awesome.
I'm going to have my wife take some
Yeah,
pictures.
let me in the.
Yeah, we can send
Hi.
We got great to hear and listen and learn online. So.